XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to ProAV Live. We've got something a little bit different for you guys today. We're going to be, rather than focusing down on individual projects or individual products, we're instead today going to be talking about a technology. So IP video technology is essentially any method of taking a video audio source over a IT network. And probably the leading technology to do that nowadays is NDI, which is a technology from a company called NewTek. So I have invited along our good friend Liam, who works for NewTek, to explain to us a little bit more about the technology as a whole, because I think it's something that a lot of people are going to be looking at. How are you doing, Liam?
Very well, thanks. How are you doing, Cole? You good?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there, mate. Keep busy. We're actually having a lot of conversations about NDI with customers right now who have never even really considered IP networks before at all for video production. And so I thought it would be a really interesting time to invite you on to give us all a bit of a beginner's rundown, if you like, on the technology. But do you want to start by introducing yourself a bit?
Yeah, sure, no worries. My name's Liam Hayter. I'm the Senior Solutions Architect for NewTek in EMEA. So I basically get involved with all of our training on NDI, systems design for customers, pre-sale support, and helping people navigate a transition to remote production workflows and working within NDI. Kind of started off in post-production originally in advertising, then I moved into live event AV. And so I've had about over 20 years experience now of all sorts of different technology shifts, from going from standard definition to high def, through going tapeless, and now working towards, sort of helping people embrace the big shift that we've now got towards IP and utilizing NDI as well.
Excellent. So let's start by giving people a little bit of a rundown about NDI as a technology. How long ago was it that you guys started working with NDI?
So if we just have a quick look at that now, within NDI itself, we've actually been released that in 2015. That's when we first announced NDI back at IBC. We actually made the decision there and then to actually make NDI freely available or royalty free for developers to utilize and integrate into their product. And so even though we actually announced NDI in 2015, if you go back into the NewTek as a business, we go all the way back to the early 80s. And we actually started off on the Commodore Amiga, which is where we start developing creative and art tools for utilizing, creating imagery or video using the Commodore Amiga platform. And over the years, as that kind of grew up, that started off with a product we had called the Video Toaster, which is one of our first software-defined production systems, because the founders realized that NDI just happened to do the Commodore Amiga just happened to do the same frame rate as 2997 for American TV. So it's quite a logical step to start trying to create software tools that anybody could access to create a TV show. Over the years, early up to the early 2000s, that then evolved into our TriCaster product line. And actually, as early as 2007, that's when we started having video over IP, because along with actually people producing content using software-defined tools, they wanted to start bringing things like PowerPoint and presentation material into those live sessions as well. And so we actually developed a technology which was originally called IVGA, and that evolved into something called AirSend, which would allow you just to take video and audio off of the Ethernet port directly into your TriCaster. And then that evolved and evolved until we finally launched NDI in 2015. And since then, we've not stopped. We're actually on our version 4.5 of NDI now. And hand in hand with that, we've been evolving our TriCaster product line and then bringing other more hardware-based endpoints along with that to support that, which we'll cover in a little bit, as well as actually opening that up as an open ecosystem that third parties can take advantage of as well. Actually, as far as it goes with our systems and with NDI itself, we use it some of the largest soft shows in the world and some of the smaller shows in the world. So today, I'm using a TriCaster Mini here at home, same as Carl is actually in his studio there as well, and we're linking those together. So we're doing quite a small production, which can be based anywhere, all the way up to things like football stadiums, arenas. We're even linking remote sites utilizing NDI and other technologies as well to start delivering remote production today. If you actually look at NDI overall, as we said, it's over 10 years of development, and the actual SDK is free of charge. And this is a big difference with us and other protocols that are out there, in that we are a closed protocol. We're not open source, so people can't go and mess about with it too much. But the idea of making it openly available for anybody to download and implement is that it keeps some stability within the actual protocol itself. So anybody who develops with NDI or any product that has the NDI logo on it will work with any other generation of NDI, both forwards and backwards.
And
but it also
so
means that because we keep control of that library, it maintains consistency as well. Sorry, Cole.
I'm just saying that is so important. I mean, for people to start trusting IP networks, I mean, that just has to be there, doesn't it? The fact that it's stable and reliable like that.
And I think with open protocols, the problem is you only have to look at things like the mobile world, where you've got open source mobile applications and OSs, and you end up with a thing called fragmentation, where you end up with so many different iterations and variants on something that it stops that interoperability. And so we think we found that right balance by this sort of freely, openly available technology, but that's maintained and developed by NewTek and also now the VizRT group. If we just have a quick look at some of the basic concepts within NDI itself and what we set out to achieve, we'll just do a very quick NDI 101. NDI itself stands for the Network Device Interface. It kind of does what it says on the tin. A bit like SDI with Serial Digital Interface, we're basically putting devices onto a network and ensuring they can interop with one another. It is a compressed protocol. It compresses video. The audio is linear PCM audio on there, and we'll cover more detail on that shortly. And as I say, it is developed by NewTek and is now actually having its own life within the company as NDI. It's designed for gigabit networks and beyond. So we wanted to make sure that any computer that's out there could utilize this. We don't want to say to people that you have to upgrade all of your network hardware or your devices so you can take advantage of the latest developments. We use it for the lowest common denominator, which is gigabit. We can use lower bandwidth networks, as I'll show you when we start talking about things like PTZ cameras. But also we can scale it up. So if we use larger networks, we get greater bandwidth out of that as well. But every computer out there has got at least gigabit networking now. Every building, every office infrastructure tends to have gigabit networking in there. So we wanted to make sure that for this to be successful, it has to be able to work on as many networks with as many devices as possible that are out there. NDI carries video and audio, so that's quite a natural thing for us to do. But it also carries metadata and control as well. So because NDI is on a network, it means it's bidirectional. Things can go in and out on the same cable. And so by passing through metadata and passing through controls, we can do some very, very clever things like camera automation or studio automation. We can even send external commands to devices or receive commands from external devices because we're a software-defined product that allows us to have that greater degree of interoperability, even within our live production system. NDI uses an efficient encoding protocol. It's called DCT, and I'll show you some comparisons in a little bit, which means that we can keep the bandwidth very, very low, but we can keep the actual image quality very, very high again. And because of the way we utilize it on the network, we treat everything as data all the way. It means that we can pass from device to device to device, encode and decode thousands of times before you see any degradation in the actual image quality. And we've done that in our own lab and tested that. We have customers that are passing these sources around again and again without any loss of image quality, whatever you want to do. It is software defined, so by that it does natively live within computers, but also hardware-based devices such as FPGA and cameras as well. And one big difference with what we've done to make this accessible and easy as possible to work with is to use something called automatic network discovery, and that is based on human naming conventions. I'll show you how that works in just a second, but that means that if you want to move across to working with IP, you don't need to start learning about IP addresses necessarily or network. You don't need to get right down into the weeds with that because every device will announce itself and will make itself available based on the name that you give it as an operator. And again, I'll give you a quick demonstration in just a moment. It's bidirectional, as we've already said, so that's data in and out, but a single cable can carry multiple streams of video and audio in both directions, drastically reducing your cable count. And one big thing with this as well is NDI can carry any frame rate, any resolution, and any color space. So by any frame rate, we can do up to 120 frames a second if you're working, say, with esports and doing gameplay capture. If you want to work with any resolution, that means we can do square video for things like Instagram or vertical video for Facebook. We can do non-broadcast aspect ratios for things such as video walls or gameplay capture content. And with any color space, we can now support up to 16-bit floating point color, which opens the doorway now for doing high HDR and high dynamic range workflows further down the line once the industry starts standardizing on what type of HDR they want to use that's out there. So
this is something I find very interesting, because I think one of people's preconceived notions, which you like, of IP video is that, well, it will never be as good. It's compressed. It's never be as good a quality as going down a good old SDI cable. But the fact that it can be done in any color space like that, you know, you can be sending 4K 60p in 12-bit color, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And we can actually go up to 8K and 16K today. I was at a trade show and one of our other partners ran over quite excitedly saying, we just sent 8K down it and you haven't announced it. It's like, well, it will, because it'll adapt. And this is the great thing about utilizing software and having this sort of baseline standard of it should work on gigabit, means that we can open up these workflows. And there's things that are possible that, you know, people haven't even discovered yet necessarily as well. When it comes to actual adoption of NDI, and this is the other big part of the success of it, is that it's exceeded the expectations in the 5 years that it's been out on the market. We know of over 1,000 companies now actively developing NDI product, and that includes now we're up to 16,000 downloads of our developer kit, which anybody can get their hands on. If you want to go right into the more technical detail of NDI, you can get that from ndi.tv. And that's growing all the time. And we've actually managed to cover the whole market, from OBS, which is the sort of streaming software that you'll see a lot of people on Twitch utilizing at the lower end of the market, all the way up to our parent company, which is VizRT Group, into Tier 1 broadcast. So there's a whole range of products at all different price points that can all speak the same language. And we're not just saying in broadcast either. We can use this for AV, teleconferencing like we're doing today. I mean, Carla linked up together via Skype. Into a whole range of different applications and devices at a whole range of different price points. And some notable industry leaders within that space, Panasonic, we're an early one that have joined us. They have a whole range of NDI-based devices, including production systems. That goes up to full bandwidth NDI cameras now, ENG cameras too. Microsoft Skype has NDI embedded in it. And as of last week, Microsoft have now announced that actually they're going to start porting NDI into Microsoft Teams as well. And of course also Avid can now actually play NDI off of the timeline, and those are just a few notable exceptions. Another recent addition is even Sony now joining us utilizing NDI with their PTZ cameras as well, and this is growing all of the time. If we talk about NDI itself, as we said, it started off as a new technology, and now since our acquisition has been becoming part of the VizRT Group, we've decided to make that a shared resource, and NDI is now its own standalone business unit, so it can actually have a life of its own, more beyond new tech. In some ways, we say sometimes that NDI is bigger than new tech itself. You know, we're not going anywhere, neither is VizRT, but we decided to give NDI a bit of freedom by giving it its own brand within the VizRT group of company. What I'll do now, I'm just going to go very quickly around the mechanics and explain this automatic detection, because I think that's an important bit to cover, and I'll just talk about the data rates and how we actually compare to some other things on the market that are out there.
Before we get
there are
into
3 types
that,
of... Sorry,
I just think it would be great to point out for people watching this, if you've got any questions about any of this, please do just leave them in the comment section, and I'll bring them up at the end. I'll probably let Liam go through these for a bit, so I won't interrupt him while he's talking about it unless it's really relevant, but we'll probably save them to the end and get to them that way. But please do leave any comments throughout down below.
Yeah, and if we don't have time to answer any questions right at the end, we will get back to you on those as well. But yeah, feel free to ask anything you like. You know, we can cover any sort of topic or any aspect of this that you'd like to get more information on. There are currently free deployments of NDI. As I said, it started in software, so this is things like your PC devices. So we have things like our TriCaster product line. We have devices that allow you to get in and out of the network for SDI that are PC based. We've then got NDI HX, which is what we initially launched, so to meet demand for add-on devices, so things to put on your camera to convert those into NDI, PTZ cameras. But then finally, also most recently, we also have NDI embedded for FPGAs, so this allows us to put NDI onto chips inside products, like our little mini converters here, so you can mount these on the camera and get full bandwidth NDI in and out of any HDMI or SDI device that's out there. If we look at how the mechanisms work, I tend to draw up just a circle when I'm planning this because I don't really want to get too bogged down with network architecture and worrying about that. Because the important thing here really is how many streams are you running with, and that will help you then inform what type of network you want to design. So this is, in my opinion, the easiest way of doing any planning on the network. But also I tend to draw it like this because I said this network could be a small one like I've got here in my home office, or it could be a large network like a football stadium or a TV studio. There's no sort of scale that changes this. The actual mechanics work the same way. So at one end, I'm going to put an NDI transmitter. In this case, this is going to be an I/O module. So this would take 8 SDI feeds in and or out of a network. And at the other end, I'm going to put a TriCaster production system. So that production system will then sit here on the network, and then that will actually then be another endpoint within that network. As you go around, you can add as many devices as you want to an NDI network. There's no limit to this. Our largest site currently is 750 simultaneous sources that's running 24/7 over in Sweden. And you can populate as many of these as you want, but as you go around, you're going to give those devices names. So it'd be like Camera A, Studio 1, Camera 2, Studio 3, Laptop 1, whatever makes sense for you as an operator. Because on the network, what we do is we actually broadcast a little packet. So if you imagine every device is kind of sending out a pulse every second, within that broadcast packet, we announce the name, but we also contain the IP address, can it be controlled, all sorts of information that the receiving device can then utilize to ascertain what you can do with it. As an operator, you don't need to get bogged down with this because this is all handled for you. You plug it into the network, as long as it gets an IP address, say in my case here, for my home broadband router, it will then start broadcasting the name. On your receiving device, so this could be a TriCaster or any NDI receiver, this would then generate a list of those names, which you can then see on your device. You then choose a device by name, and at that point, we then open up a port on the network, and then we start transmitting video and audio between those devices. Initially, that's going to be 40 megabit, because that generates your program and your multi-viewer preview feed if you're using a NewTek TriCaster, and this is only available on the NewTek TriCasters. When you then cut to a program feed, we then increase the data rate because you're going out on air. We think it's better to do this dual mode because that means you actually get more data and more bandwidth. So we can do 16 inputs on a 2 gig network connection. I can do up to 8 4K feeds on a TriCaster Mini with only 2 gig NICs because we have this dual transport methodology. So when we send to program, we get the highest quality possible, at full resolution, full frame rate. And when you're in a multi-viewer, you're looking at something in preview, use a much smaller amount of data, but it's real-time locked per frame to the full bandwidth image. And this is how we can actually get more out of your gigabit network as you go along. And as you grow this up, as you add more sources, you simply add more streams, and devices can reach multiple endpoints at the same time. So a PTZ camera, for example, could be received by up to 5 devices before you run out of network bandwidth or device bandwidth. For a TriCaster, you could actually have all 16 feeds going out. And on a single gigabit link, you're going to be able to get 7 streams of SDI equivalent video in and out at HD, or 2 feeds of 12G in and out on a network on a gigabit cable. And as I said, though, there are 3 types of NDI. So that's the first type. And the other one is NDI HX, which is what you'll typically see in the majority of PTZ cameras. But there are also some that use full bandwidth. But just to use an example, I'm using my 4K PTZ camera here today. That is using a much smaller amount of data rate because it uses NDI HX, which is a more compressed version of NDI to make it more efficient on the network. But with any devices like that, along that NDI communication, we're going to get your tally, your pan, your tilt, your zoom, focus, and shutter, all controlled via NDI, and then your receiver is going to get the audio and video feed back. So that all of this can then be done through one single gigabit Ethernet cable. So no more worrying about RS-232, or any of these other different converter cables that you'd want to use in the past. Through that one single gigabit Ethernet cable, you can bring video, audio, control, and also even power your cameras and devices if you've got PoE or power over Ethernet on the network there as well. So this makes it very, very lightweight and very, very elegant to start operating on the network. The way that that then works is exactly the same way. Small preview feed to do your preview, a higher bandwidth program video feed for actually what you put out on air. But in this case, we can then also pass that control protocol back at the same way. And even though it's a different type of NDI, it still works exactly the same way. And with NDI, you always make sure you're only using the data that you need to do the job that you want to use it for. I'm just going to go a little bit into the data rates very quickly. I'm not going to go too far into this, but again, the information is there as part of the SDK. But if you look at some of the other things that are out there on the market, like this chart here, I've actually got 12G at the top. So that's 12G SDI with all the SDI data rates going across the board there as well. And then I've got things like SMPTE 2022 and 2110, which are the uncompressed protocols. And then I've drawn a comparison at the bottom between ProRes and NDI. So basically, even with SDI, you're still using data as you go along. And all we've done is move that data onto the network. And when you look at uncompressed protocols, as technically advanced and wonderful as they can be, you're still using the same amount of data, and that gets very expensive very quickly. You can't use gigabit Ethernet. In fact, you're going to need 10 gig Ethernet and above, even 40 gig or 100 gig Ethernet to start doing video over IP. And so with compression, we can actually achieve 25 times more streams of NDI at 4K than you could with an uncompressed protocol or even with SDI. So that's a massive, massive game changer in terms of the amount that you can be able to save in terms of cabling, cost, infrastructure, but also operational cost of powering all of that. If we actually look at the data rates, NDI-HX starts at around 15 megabit for an HD feed. Full NDI, you're looking at around 350 megabit for a 4K feed, and then anywhere in between. And again, we do have charts that are available for you to help you with your network planning. But if we look in real terms, we can basically, on a single gigabit link, we can basically get 45 streams of standard definition, 7 streams of 1080p 50, and we can do 2 streams of 4K in each direction on a gigabit link. So that's 2 in, 2 out, or 7 in, 7 out, which dramatically reduces your cable count. If you use a 10 gig network, you're going to get 10 times that amount, because we're not going to change the data rate, we're just going to give you more scale. And at this sort of level, even then, you can end up with an insane number of streams that you can utilize and start bringing around on any scale of infrastructure you want to choose. I'm going to, effectively, in summary though, all of this means that we can do the job of 14 3G SDI cables on a single link, and even more so depending on how you want to deploy that as well. I'm just going to wrap up very quickly on a couple of the new products that we've got. Carl, were there any questions online about what we just covered very briefly there?
No, nothing to be honest. So if anyone has got any, please do leave them. We're getting a decent amount of people watching it, but no questions. So I guess you're doing a pretty good job of explaining it, Liam.
Fantastic. Well, we'll give you guys my email at the end, and obviously, of course, you can reach out through the guys at ProActive as well, and we can pick up on anything that may spring to mind later on. But I'll give you some links at the end, some documentation and where to find that. And as I said, we're always here and happy to help you guys. Absolutely. If we just have a quick look at some of the new products that we've launched today. These are ones that we launched in the last month. So we've got the NDI PTZ UHD camera, which is what I'm using here as my webcam today over Skype. We've got the TriCaster Mini 4K production system, which both Carl and I are both utilizing in our own respective studios. And again, we're linking those together using Skype TX. And then finally, we've also got some mini converters now, which are called the Spark Plus IO. These are available as 4K and SDI as well. So if we start off looking at the Spark Plus devices, a lot of you are already going to have HDMI and SDI devices out there that you want to utilize. Just because you're moving across into working with IP, we're deliberately trying to say to you, you don't need to replace everything. It's not a case of it's all IP or nothing. So we recognize that, of course, everybody out there has got cameras and devices they'll already want to utilize today. And that's where the Spark Plus IO devices really come into their own. As I showed you briefly earlier, they're very, very compactable devices. They do have a small hot shoe mount on the bottom, so you can attach these onto a magic arm or on top of your camera. And then around the back of these little guys, you've got an HDMI in and an out port. You've got a 3.5mm jack for injecting audio, so you might want to connect that like a Sennheiser radio mic, for example, or a headset. And then you've, of course, got your Ethernet port on the far right there. That Ethernet port will do power over Ethernet. So if I plug this into our TriCaster Mini, it will just power it off the Mini, and I can go up to 90 meters on a single Ethernet cable all the way over to this device and still utilize it with my existing camera. But I can also turn this device around because I can also do decode with these devices. So we can actually use this to output. So if I connect this up to a monitor on stage or a confidence monitor, I can use this to send any NDI feed into another display or another output. Or maybe I've got existing SSD recorders like Atomos or Blackmagic that I want to utilize. And these are available as both 3G and SDI varieties. And they actually ship with 2 of the HDMI ones if you buy the new TriCaster Mini as well to get you up and running. But we have a whole ton of other different devices from 2110 interoperation through to SDI and 4K devices and other add-on devices that you can have. But these are the latest addition to our NDI family, and they are full bandwidth NDI as well. The other new device that we've got is the PTZ UHD camera. As I said, that's the camera that I'm using here today. We have the original PTZ one still available. So I've got one of those here. So that is a HD 1080p 50 pan tilt zoom camera. As I said, around the back of that little guy there, same idea. You've got an audio injection port for, say, like a tie mic, and then you've got your Ethernet port there for power over Ethernet, control, tally, and everything else. So we still have the HD version. That's at around 2,299 expat as a list price. And then the new PTZ UHD is coming at around $4,995. But that's a full 4K P60 camera. But unlike some of the others on the market, it's using something called NDI HX2, which is an update on NDI HX, but that enables us to utilize 4K P60 video across the network. And the same idea, we can take pan, tilt, zoom, and control. It's a fantastic, fantastic camera. Very, very smooth motor position, 30 times zoom on there, and even works well as a good webcam for your home studio side as well. But we've also done, you might not have the budget for those sort of cameras. So during the current situation, we looked at what we can do with mobile devices. And now we have something called the NDI HX camera app for iOS, which I've actually got running here now. So I'm just going to show you that very quickly. If I just cut across to this, this is actually set up in my home studio, and this is using my old iPhone 7 as an HD camera now over my home Wi-Fi network. Up here, there's the PTZ UHD camera, which I'm just running on the top. Here's my TriCaster Mini on the side that I'm running today's webinar through. And of course, then I've got my user interface and display at the top there. But this is a fantastic application. It's only $20 from the Apple App Store, but it does give you full camera control across there and be able to use on any iPad or iPhone device. If you want to utilize that with the latest generation iPhones that have got a 4K sensor on there, you will get 4K NDI over Wi-Fi from your phone or your mobile device, as well as the audio feed coming in there as well, which opens up a whole ton of different workflow options. Likewise, we've also now done a similar device, which is called NDI HX Capture. That does the same thing. So NDI HX Capture will actually allow you to bring in your actual feed from your iPhone there as well. So what I'm going to do is if I actually start up on my iPhone now and start the Capture app and hit the screen broadcast button to start that up, I'm just going to bring that now into the TriCaster here as well. And all being well, if I bring that across, now what I can do is I can actually bring my iPhone in as well as a source. And that will then work with any application that I want to from an iPhone, including things like esports capture. As we said, it's any resolution, any frame rate. So if I turn my camera on the side, I'll get horizontal video. If I hold it portrait, I'm now going to get portrait video there as well. But again, it's going to be $20. It's a very low entry point, but it gives you additional sources that you can utilize on your network. And then, of course, there's the TriCaster Mini, which we've just done an update on. This has these direct NDI connections, so we can plug cameras and portable devices directly into the back of it. No network switch needed. And it has things like Skype TX inbuilt as well, so we can actually link up via Skype our two productions between my studio and Cole's studio. We've also added a technology called SRT in here as well now, so if you wanted to use secure, reliable transport over public internet, you can use that to bring those in for your remote productions too. And we do have examples of this setup. We'll go into more detail in that next week when we have another follow-up webinar about remote production. But all of this can start being brought together using NDI technology, but also teleconferencing and remote production tools as well, just like we're doing today. And Carl, you're going to be talking a bit more, aren't you, on Friday about your setup that you've got there at ProActive as well?
Absolutely. As part of the way that I've learned the TriCaster system for myself, because I'm very new to all of this, much like most of our customers, I've actually been setting up a TriCaster setup, which is what this control panel is here in front of me, here in my office as well. And so I'm going to be doing a stream probably on Friday to talk through my journey with it, if you like, and the sort of what I had to pay attention to, what I didn't have to pay attention to, and give you guys a bit of a chance to ask some questions. It'll probably be quite a short stream because there's not a huge amount to talk about, to be honest, because it's been quite easy and simple.
Well, that's always great to hear. I mean, I found the same thing with the Mini as well, as it just takes all of that complexity out of it. It's just almost like a plug and play experience to a degree. Yes, you have to learn to use our user interfaces, but that's something if you're familiar with vision mixing, or even if you're not, again, we try to make that as easy as possible to work with. I just want to leave you guys with two more things. If you go onto ndi.tv and you want to learn more about NDI or start using NDI today, you can go to these two links. They're both available just from www.ndi.tv. If you download our NDI tools, that will give you something called Scan Converter, which is allowing you to take any computer and turn it into an NDI source, including your webcam and microphone. You get Virtual Input, which is this tool here, which is the one that allows us to actually use NDI with any teleconference application. Again, we'll cover that next week, working with Teams, Google Hangouts, Skype for Business, and Zoom. You can utilize these with all of your favorite video conferencing applications. But also there's tools in there. There's one called Studio Monitor, which allows you to view any NDI source on the network and record any NDI source on the network. So all you would really need is something like the iPhone application or the Capture app and the free NDI tools, and you're up and running. You can do that on your home network today. Or you can just use the free NDI tools on 1 or 2 laptops on your home broadband and start actually experiencing what it's like to work with NDI. And of course, we're here to assist if you get into any trouble with that, but I'm sure you won't. If you want to get into more technical information and you want to get your hands on the SDK, maybe you've got some ideas for applications of your own you want to develop or work with, or you actually really want to get right down deep into the technical side of NDI and what's possible, then you can download the SDK. And we publish that with regular updates so you can get an idea of what's coming next to an NDI on a technical basis as well. In terms of our product line, we've got a whole extensive ecosystem. We're not going to cover that today. But yeah, again, we can send out copies of this for anybody that wants to see it. But we do cater for all types of devices and workflows and applications within the new tech product line there as well, to make things as easy as possible to do any level of production tomorrow. On that note, I'm just going to say thank you very much for your time, guys. And Carl, I'll just come back to you and we can go through any questions that may be there online.
Absolutely. If you want to pop yourself back into full screen mode, Liam, we can get up the split screen mode so that we can go through some of these questions. So we've got 2 questions come in so far, which I wanted to talk through. So first one is basically just a simple product tech support one. Yosafat is saying he's getting trouble getting his NDI virtual input on his Mac. When he opens Zoom or Google Meet, it never shows the NDI virtual input option on the camera input settings. If it's not showing there within Zoom or Google Meet, you might just want to check that you've got a NDI source on the network. The other thing to check is that you've got the drivers actually installed on your computer. On the downloads page of NDI tools, there's the software as well as the NDI drivers. So you might want to check that.
There is, Apple have made some changes within Catalina, unfortunately, which is security related. Not that we're a security risk, but they've actually made a lot of changes in the back end there. At the moment, the only devices you can use with the OS X side of it with virtual input are full NDI devices. So that could be things like the mini converter, like we said, or a full NDI camera, or NDI HX2, which is things like our new PTZ camera or the camera app for iOS. For some reason at the moment, they're not allowing us to use NDI HX version 1 through that at this time. If he has any other trouble, again, you can get in touch. My email is lhayter@newtech.com. You can reach out to us or through the chat as well. But said not everything is fully supported under Mac, but we've only just done our first version of the virtual input for Mac, and we will be revising and obviously developing like that and continuing to develop that like we do with everything else. But right now, it is to HX2 devices or full NDI in software.
It is
there are workarounds.
So there are ways of getting it working. I'm actually running that right now. So I have a Mac here, and I've got their new suite of tools on here. I did have some trouble getting it up and started at the beginning simply because of Mac's security permissions again, but that was more to do with the scan capture side of things, scan converter, because I've realized after a little bit of frustration that I actually had to get the Mac to allow scan converter to record the screen. Funnily enough, otherwise scan converter couldn't do its thing. And so there could be something simple like that tripping you up. But yeah, double check all those things and get in touch if you're still having problems. Right, James Corlett is saying, can an NDI signal be sent out over the internet rather than just on a local network? Which is a fantastic question. Now, I'm sure you've got some things you want to talk about within this, Liam, but we did do a stream last week, actually, here on ProAV with a company called BirdDog, who make a solution called BirdDog Cloud, which does exactly that. It's a very secure and reliable way of basically connecting NDI endpoints over the internet and over a cloud service so that you can effectively join 2 local networks together using an internet connection. So right now, for example, we're bringing in and we're combining our Trocasters just using Skype, but we could be using something like that in order to effectively treat my NDI, my IT network here, and Liam's in his house as the same one, if we wanted to go down that route.
Yeah, 100%. There are a few third parties out there, and BirdDog Cloud's a prime example of that. There are other companies out there that will allow you to do PTZ control via NDI and different transports. People like LiveView support NDI, so you can actually go up and across on mobile signals if you want. There's a whole ton of big ecosystem devices we haven't even found yet. But actually, amazing. NDI itself, if you have a virtual private network and you have sufficient bandwidth, so that little chart that I showed you, if people want to look back on the YouTube video later on or download on the SDK, all of this is published. If you can actually get 150 megabit between your points, you'll be able to send NDI natively. But going over public internet, we end up with the situation where you have to bounce around all over the place. So you need some sort of methodology. And a hardware-based virtual private network, for those that can afford to do so, is the best way of doing it. We've already done some internal tests where we link graphics from Sweden with video feeds from Dubai being brought into London, controlled from Paris on our internal corporate network. You can do some very interesting stuff. Now, this is what I call bleeding edge. It's not, not anybody's gonna be able to do it. It's not just gonna work. But if you have the right environment and connectivity between sites, then you can run NDI native if you want to do so.
And it will all get easier over time. I mean, this is the exciting thing about video over IP.
Yeah, and it's not going to go away. And so things like Bird Dog Cloud are a fantastic way of doing this over public internet. And those are the differences. Is it public internet or private? And how are you going to bring those sites together? But we do have people doing it over some interesting distances and geographies, SDI in, SDI out, just using NDI as a transport.
Absolutely. So one last thing I wanted to talk about, the thing I've run up against the most with customers that are looking at NDI networks for the first time is just really simply, so rather than trying to decide between different methods of going over IP, it's a simple, do I go down IP, aka NDI, or do I go for simple SDI cables? And so the differences between the two for a simple, small, maybe a 3-camera setup into a vision mixer, or even just a recorder, what are the main differences that people are going to see between the two, and the main advantages for going NDI, do you reckon? What's going to make the most difference for people?
I think the biggest one is the cable count reduction.
Absolutely.
Because effectively, if you use your switch like you would use a DA or a router, or a digital amplifier when you're trying to get multiple signals, you don't need to mix stuff up. So you can actually have a link between two switches or a device and a switch, and then you branch it out into as many as you want. So the actual architecture and the amount of cabling that you use drastically reduces. It's not one cable for everything. It's a cable for many things and break it out.
That can be power, it can be audio, video, time code, control. I started doing a really simple 3-camera sort of wiring diagram for them, just saying, okay, take this from here, this from here, this from here to go to here. And on the normal one, the amount of what I had to color code them and all sorts of stuff, that's for a simple 3-camera setup. Whereas NDI, it was a TriCaster and one cable going to each camera. Done. Yeah,
I mean, we've got a case study with a studio in Washington with Celebro, and they reckon, they make the cable reduction. They pulled out 2 kilometers of cable.
Wow.
And they replaced it with one big fiber link. And it's not just the amount of cable as well, but also there's the fact that it's all one cable. It's all Cat 6 Ethernet.
Yep.
So
which is a cheap cable.
As cheap as chip. So we did an event in Germany where, being a bit of a plonker, I left all my cables behind in London. I was getting on the fly, ordered them from Amazon. They got delivered the next day to the event, and we just plugged up. And it was just like 50 quid on Ethernet cable. Yeah, exactly. Because it's all a common
Imagine if you'd done that with fiber.
You can't just do that with SDI. Yeah.
Imagine if you'd done that with fiber cables. That would have been quite an expensive problem.
But with Ethernet you can, and along with that is the distance you can run. I mean, as we've gone from I mentioned earlier, so we're going through this sort of transition from SD to HD and so on. As we've gone each generation of SDI, the cable runs before you need amplification or DAs is shrunk and shrunk and shrunk.
Yep.
And now with an Ethernet cable, I can still use my HDMI device or my SDI device, but a short cable.
Yeah.
And I could run up to 90 meters on that one cable run before I start losing transmission. You can't do that with some of the other existing fabric.
I don't like to go above 5 meters. I mean, you can go up to 15. Anything above 10 often gets sketchy, and I don't really like to go above 5. So
and the number of times I have bought long cables and somebody's gone and trodden on the end of it in a floor box, and then you have to bin it. It's like, well, in this case, it's another Ethernet.
Exactly.
Cheap as chip.
So we're starting to get a couple more questions coming in, which is good. So Yusufat is saying again, how fast is the speed of Ethernet do you recommend for NDI? He runs NDI via a home Wi-Fi network, and it does have delays.
Yep.
What might be causing delays over his home Wi-Fi network?
It's going to depend on network congestion,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also going to depend on the signal strength and what's in the way. So Wi-Fi is a fun one because the more things you have in a room, like, you know, if you say had an arena full of people and trying to use Wi-Fi, you basically put a big body of water in there, literally, that'll interfere. So the way I've got it is I've actually got like a Netgear mesh extender here in my room, and that's what I talk to with my phone, and that talks back to here. But if I'm trying to go through all of my walls with the Wi-Fi, then that might start interfering. You might start getting packet loss. So what you want to do is use things like you know, speed test tools, and actually start having a look at your network performance there, and actually how you actually link that up. The other thing you may find is it depends on what generation of phone, what type of device you're trying to use NDI over Wi-Fi with. So again, it's network topology, but so I've got it working absolutely fine in here. So I've got mesh extender to my switch. I've got a little
I find those mesh
switch
extenders,
that talks to everything else, and off I go.
I've been hearing a lot of good things about Wi-Fi mesh extenders.
I mean, you can do that for roaming cameras. I mean, for us, what it boils down to is you need whatever network switch you use, and we recommend a managed switch because you can tweak it, but you need to allow 150 megabit for an HD feed, full bandwidth, 375 megabit for a 4K, and latency is key. Because what we have to do is, if you've got all these streams of video running at 50 frames a second or 25 frames a second, you've got a window to interleave and weave all of these together. So you can have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah, I've got drawings of this if anybody ever wants to see it. But to make that work, we've got to do that within a frame or within a second. So we've got to try and queue all of this up and fire it across the network. And so things like latency and that, you know, as long as it's below 16 milliseconds, and you can do this using a speed test and, you know, Wireshark and some other tools that are out there, you can test your network and see what you're getting. But again, I can help make advice on that if people want. But if you're just going into your home router direct, typically they're not full gigabit. And so again, that's going to bandwidth it, that's going to throttle your network down. You want your broadband to give the IP address to your devices, but then have a little small network switch attached to your broadband that you know is going to be able to do the performance that you want. And it doesn't have to break the bank.
No,
you know,
network
something
switches
that's
are
a
very
known,
affordable.
decent brand, you know.
Absolutely. You range between sort of 20 quid to 100 quid for a simple one, and then up to, I mean, the max you're going to spend on a network switch for a normal home network would be a proper managed Power over Ethernet Plus one, which might run you back like 200 quid, maybe 300 quid.
Yeah, well, I mean, depending on on your, so it could be under $1,000, anywhere up to $1,000, depending on what you're doing. It's all about volume and scale. Sure. So I'm using an 8-port switch here that's unmanaged for everything that I do, and that worked fine for me. But it's going to be the right tool for the job, and we don't recommend particular network switches or brands because, again, it's not about that. It's about trying to make it as open as possible. But you know, make sure it's good. Make sure it's got what we call a high-speed backplane, so every gigabit port runs at a gigabit, and you'll be fine. A router, home broadband routers typically will step down to 100 megabit. They're not designed for full bandwidth, unfortunately, but make that work.
Okay, so one nice one which might be nice to finish on is Kim is saying, how does the future look for live streaming? What does it look like in 2 to 3 years, do we think? And does it all run on via 5G, or what things do you see for NDI in the future?
Well, we're not allowed to talk about future development, but let's just say, you know, I think the current situation's accelerated a lot of different aspects of NDI deployment. I think there's quite a few articles that I've been writing lately, which are going out in AV magazine and the likes. And again, we'll talk about this more on next week's session, actually, when we talk about remote production, about what I call active and passive audiences. You've got active contributors, so like myself and you here, Carl, where we're talking on Skype, and we've got teleconferencing, or we could have SRT or remote camera integration because we need to be part of the show. But the live streaming aspect is where people are more watching, and then we've got a live Q&A like you have on your end of the network. So everybody's still contributing, but it's picking the right tools and technology to bring that together to create that type of production or event. We do have live streaming encoders in all of our systems. We can go out to YouTube, Vimeo, any of the major platforms that you want simultaneously. So we can use the TriCaster as a really neat way of gathering NDI and remote sources of all sorts of different varieties, and then live stream out that production. And I think what we're going to see is more things like we're doing here today, which is rather than me traveling to your studio or, people actually flying over to do an event, I think this teleconference integration, when you combine this with things like virtual sets and chroma keying, like I've been doing today,
Absolutely.
you can start doing some very, very rich, interesting stuff, because people are already getting quite fatigued of seeing a grid of faces. And so it's tools like this and technologies like NDI and TriCast that allow us to do something more visually interesting and more variety to actually keep people, audiences entertained and brought on. And that's something that we're actively looking into all of these spaces at the moment. And, there will be more to come in the future, but
I think the world of live streaming as a whole, though, is going to expand massively. I think more and more companies, I mean, it already has expanded massively just in the last couple of months because of COVID-19. But I think because of that, we were already seeing big growths in live streaming over the last couple of years. I think this has not just accelerated it, but like a steep cliff edge accelerated it. Because people are really quickly having to come up with it now, but also are then thinking, hang on, this works. We can integrate some of this into what we normally do as well. Take ProAV, for example. I didn't do a live stream with ProAV before all of this happened. Now we're doing 7. I mean, I've got 4 this week. And will we carry on doing them in this volume after work goes back to normal and we can do our normal videos again and we can do live events again? Probably not. But will we carry on doing some live streams? Absolutely, because for some things, they are better. More people can watch them around the world rather than just the people that can actually travel to us as a location. So I think there'll be huge demand.
Exactly. I think going forward as well, it's actually going to be technologies like ours that can pivot, because we don't. There is talk about things happening again, or maybe something else will come along. Heaven forbid, nothing is like it has been. But technologies that allow you to seamlessly transition from an in-person production to remote production. One of the things that we've found is a lot of our customers have been able to make that shift very, very quickly, which has been fantastic to see. It's really quite inspiring. But back to the question very quickly though. I mean, things like 5G and that, we can already work over wide area network. We are a compressed protocol. It's just what you run that on. 5G does have the potential to be able to carry NDI. We can already do it over 4G within, with partners like LiveView and some others and public internet. So 5G really does have a lot of potential for what a remote production could look like. Do you need to send a large OB van anymore?
No.
Where do people need to be to do their job?
A simple little live view, and that could be a little like live view solo. It could be a larger backpack type option. Means you can have a camera guy with a camera on his shoulder, with that on his back, in the middle of a field, sending one of these up with NDI over into a TriCaster.
We've got a football club in East London that does exactly that. When they do an away game, they send a live view. They did one from Ireland, and they live vision mix it on their TriCaster. Back at the stadium. They don't need to move everything, and they've been doing this for years. It's not. Amazing. We're not. This isn't new to us. It's now. As you say, it's got wider acceptance. It's just wider acceptance of what is a broadcast. What is a stream, and we combine this with things like the AV spaces, the meeting rooms, and the auditoriums. It's like, well, they're all the same thing now. It's a network that you do stuff on. What do you want to use it with? So
absolutely, like I said, we're going to have so many more companies, productions looking at live streaming and methods thereof of using all of this in their own businesses and their works. And I think NDI is going to be the technology that is become increasingly at the center of that, because it is very simple to use and it's quite cheap to use in some situations for small ones. And like you said right at the beginning, this can be used for huge TV stadiums, sports stadiums. And it can be used for just a simple gamer going from his gaming computer into OBS with completely free tools. It is so scalable. I think that is why it's going to take off so massively in this market. But cool. Okay, it looks like we haven't got any more questions there, which to bring up, I think that's a really good place to end it. So thank you so much for all of your time today, Liam. I really appreciate it.
Anytime at all. Been an absolute pleasure joining you guys. So yeah, look forward to joining you again next week and seeing you stream on Friday.
Yep. So streams over the next couple of days. We're going to be doing one with Canon tomorrow, then one with Alistair Chapman on the Sony FS5 on Thursday. And then, as Liam says, I'll be doing one myself on Friday to talk through my setup here. And then next week, I haven't announced the schedule for that next week, but we will be doing one with Liam talking over specifically on the TriCaster Mini 4K on working remotely, doing productions exactly like we're doing now, where not more than one people in a room, working remotely as much as possible, because of course that's going to be very relevant for a lot of people moving forward. But for now, thank you so much for everyone watching. I can see all the chat. Kim saying congratulations to 40k subscribers. Thank you very much, Kim. We hit that about yesterday, 40,000 people on YouTube. So thank you very much for noticing, Kim. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for your fantastic questions. But above all, thank you, Liam, for joining us. Okay,
thank you very much.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/XSWD.